Hey, this is for you. And
Yay!
nice.
We did it!
Quick test, Mayor Ortega. I do hear some audio.
Good morning, board members. We are having a technical difficulty in the room. We are moving some staff around so that they can present to you from their own laptops. But we will continue to share on this screen, and individuals in the boardroom will use their laptop microphones to communicate. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you. Vice Mayor Edwards, are you on the meeting?
Yes, I am. Can you see me?
Oh, okay, great. Okay, great. I was trying to scan through. We are getting resettled around, so I can take a roll call if you are ready for me to do that.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And so Pat, if you want to do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Veronica Malone, City of Avondale. Councilmember Clay Goodman. City of
Present.
Buckeye.
Present.
Mayor Kevin Hardkey, City of Chandler.
Good morning and here.
Good morning, here.
Vice Mayor Monica Dorsey, City of Omaha. Councilmember Mike Sharnow from Town of Fountain Hills.
I am here.
Mayor Bridget Peterson, Town of Gilbert.
I am here.
Councilmember Lauren Tomachoff, City of Glendale.
Present.
Vice Mayor Bill Stipp, City of Goodyear.
Present.
Supervisor Jack Sellers, Maricopa County.
Here.
Councilmember Francisco Heredia, City of Mesa.
Here.
Vice Mayor John Edwards, City of Peoria.
Here.
Mayor Kate Gallego, City of Phoenix. Town of Queen Creek, Councilmember Jeff Brown.
I am here.
City of Scottsdale, Mayor David Ortega. I see him on our list. Councilmember Roland Winter, City of Surprise.
Mayor Ortega, yes, I'm on board.
Councilmember Robin Arredondo Savage, City of Tempe.
Ma'am, I'm here.
Thank you, ma'am. City of Tolleson, Councilmember Adolfo Gomez.
Present.
Town of Wickenburg, Mayor Rui Pereira.
Present.
And Town of Youngtown, Mayor Michael LaValle.
Here I am.
Thank you. Chair, we're ready to proceed.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Good morning, everybody. If a committee member would like to ask a question or make a comment during the meeting, if you would kindly type in your comment into the box and it'll be read aloud and answered. And also a reminder that all meeting, if you can mute your phone or your microphone on your phone, I appreciate it. The first item on the agenda is the public comment. For today's meeting, public comments is being taken in a written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2 is the Chief Executive Report. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to all members of the boards, thank you for this opportunity and welcome to our meeting. And technology is wonderful until it isn't, but it looks like we're scrambling here to make it work. So I hope you can all hear me. Unless you don't want to hear me, then you can just put the sound down, but that's okay. I want to go over a few things that have happened since the last time we met that we are very excited about. The first one is a relatively new program and certainly a new twist on this. Generally, just to give a little bit of background, when we have a major capital project, whether it's a light rail project or a park and ride or something like that, and it does impact the local community, which many of our projects do, we offer a lot of a wide range of business assistance, whether it be through marketing or business access, construction, and that's been something we've done consistently for the last 15, 20 years. What we have not done, except for in some very limited basis, is offer direct financial aid to those businesses. It's something which is not allowed under federal guidelines, and so we've had a difficult time making things happen. Well, because of the impact and the interest in the South Central and Downtown Hub extension and the Northwest extension, and the combination of the impact on businesses of COVID pandemic in addition to the construction activities, we, Valley Metro and the City of Phoenix, are now partnering to offer for the first time a direct grant program to small businesses. And we certainly appreciate the Phoenix City Council, the Phoenix City Development Board for funding this pilot program. And this is direct aid. There are various levels of aid, a process to go through. Valley Metro is managing this process through a contractor that we have chosen. The program officially opened just about 6 weeks ago. And so far, we've had 66 businesses along the route apply for the program. 14 have completed the application process, and we've already issued a total of $73,500 in financial assistance. We're very, very excited about this, along with our partners at the City of Phoenix, about the possibility and mostly the fact that we can give direct aid to businesses who are impacted by our construction period. There's no doubt there is some impact to that. So we're watching this very carefully and excited about the potential and hope that it lives up to our expectations and the city's expectations in providing direct aid to these businesses. The next thing we have, which is a big, we believe a big win for regional transit, is we recently announced that APS's Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station has joined our Vanpool program. as the Palo Verde employees return to work, and I hope those who are actually running the switches on Palo Verde actually have been at work, but as the full workforce returns to work, they will be using our Valley Metro van pools. Their participation will add between 70 and 90 vans to our program starting June 1st and going on through December. And we're coordinating with Palo Verde's communications team on getting the word out. And as we all drive west to LA or something, it always is amazing to me just how far out Valley Metro, or not Valley Metro, but Palo Verde is, and the need to have a great commute solution. So we're excited about this, and this is especially important because with the pandemic, as you can well imagine, we have had many of our commuter vans sidelined because people have not been commuting. So this absolutely helps us to take some of these van pools that have been sitting in the parking lots and put them back to use. So we're excited about that. The next thing, for those of you who have been on the board a while, remember every year we have a transit design rap contest. Now, not a rap as in music, but a rap as in WRAP. And we open it up to mainly high school students. And this year's winner is a junior from Marcus Deniza High in Tempe, Sydney Stormont. Marcus Deniza sort of seems to have the talent and the formula down, because I believe this is the third time in the last 5 years that Marcus Deniza has won. As a matter of fact, Sydney was a participant last year and she took second place. So you see the art, the beautiful artwork, and the students are incredibly talented. With the theme "Together We Go," this rap is already on a bus and will be on a light rail vehicle also for the next year. And so I ask you to keep your eyes open, because if you're like me, you all of a sudden notice this rap many times. And so literally millions of eyes will be able to see Sydney's artwork over the coming year. And it's really a nice addition to our fleet and our community engagement. The last thing I want to touch on is there has been a lot of question. This primarily relates to the West Valley. There is an issue with our provider in the West Valley that we've been working with our cities on over the last couple months. This specific issue came up in the budget workshop last week, so I thought I'd give you an update. We meaning Valley Metro staff, are continuing with individual meetings with city staff, and some elected. Some of you have joined in those meetings. The reason for individual meetings is because the impact of a disruption in service and a change in service is widespread, but it's also very unique to the city, depending upon which services they actually use, whether they just have a express bus or whether they actually have circulators, which are paid for not out of regional funds, but out of local funds. And so we've been meeting with each city to make sure we can answer all their questions and get their input and let them know what the impact will be for them. We're almost done with those meetings, and thank you very much to you and all your staff who have participated in those. We'll finish those up by tomorrow. And then early next week, we'll be getting back together with the group as a whole, because this truly will be a group decision as to how we move forward in making sure that we have ongoing service and that we don't have any type of significant interruption in service in the West Valley. So that's our goals and objectives. So hopefully by next week, we'll have a solution that'll be decided on by the West Valley cities and City of Phoenix. Just a calendar of upcoming things. I want to point out, you see the highlighted June 17th. Please note that will be an earlier meeting and probably a longer meeting, because that is the day that the board exercises their overview and review evaluation for basically me and Mike Manow on that day. So we'll be in executive session and would like you to carve that out of your schedule and plan on a little bit longer meeting to take care of those annual evaluations. And Mr. Chair, that's my report.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Okay. Looks like we have a question out there, Pat. Are we there, Pat?
Yes, I'm here. I'm trying to navigate a headset too, so
Yeah, that's okay.
this is new for me. Sorry.
Well,
Vice Mayor
Oh.
Stipp.
Okay. Yeah, I got the question. The question was, what is the essence of the issue? Vice Mayor Stipp, the essence of the issue is that our provider in the West Valley, the company named Total Ride, has experienced both because of the COVID pandemic and the drastic reductions to service. We've cut express service down, and City of Peoria eliminated the POCO temporarily. They have run into some financial issues, and they have informed us that they cannot continue under the current financial situation providing service, and so they have provided us or asked us to reconsider some of the pricing. That contract is a very, very low price. It's right now it's priced at considerably less than existing service that we have in both the East Valley and in the City of Phoenix for similar types of services. And so they've our staff has been working with them to come up with a financial adjustment that might be possible, and we've been sharing that with the city to see if that's something that your city's staff would be interested in pursuing, or whether there is some other course of action we want to take to make sure that we have uninterrupted service. But it comes from a request from the provider based on their financial situation, and they've told us that if there is not some kind of adjustment, that they would probably exit the market. And so we're taking that seriously because we want to make sure that the service is uninterrupted, and that's what we've been working on. Is working with your staff to come up with some sort of solution to make sure that that is not interrupted. And it may involve the existing service provider. It may be some other option, some other provider, or some other type of service. That's what we're exploring, all the different options. I hope that explains in enough detail for you.
Chair Edwards, Mayor Gallego has her hand raised.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to echo a little bit of what Scott said about our small business assistance program. The city got creative about how to find money for it, and it seems to be well received. And then we are looking at other business assistance programs, including through the American Rescue Plan, to support those businesses. So I hope that will be a good success story, but wanted to mention that we're not using the regional funds for that moving forward. And
Thank you, Mayor Gallego. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gallego. And I just want to say that when you talk about innovative, Phoenix City staff has been amazing in coming up with this solution. Like I said, we can't use other funds to fund these types of things, but the need is real and it's out there. And Phoenix staff and the electeds, Mayor Gallego, under your leadership, really get creative to look at a variety of sources to fund this most important, and also recognizing the double hit from COVID and the construction. So, you know, we're very grateful and thank the city of Phoenix, both your council and the staff, for stepping up and coming up with what we think is a very creative solution, and hopefully is a model for the future projects that we can learn from and play off of. But it wouldn't be possible without the city of Phoenix funding it. So thank you.
Well, thank you both. I appreciate it. Okay. Item number 3 is the minutes. The minutes for the April 22nd, 2021 joint meeting are presented for approval. And so I'm requesting a motion and a second to approve the April 22nd joint meeting minutes.
Mayor Hurtke, so move.
We have a motion.
Gallego, second.
Thank you, ma'am. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, motion carries. All right. Item number 4 is the Audit and Finance Subcommittee report. So Councilmember Arredondo Savage, do you have an update for us?
Of course. Thank you very much, Chair Edwards. I always have an update. Happy to give it. I kind of went through and just looked at some of the things that we talked about at our AFS meeting. And obviously, one of the forefront things that we've been focusing on is the budget. But also with the budget, we've been talking a little bit about the 5-year capital, and then also our quarterly report and an item regarding RPTA board authority delegation. So in regards to these items, the 5-year capital, the assumptions, the committee was pretty much in agreement, but I think the Mayor Gallego brought up a really good point about really looking into how we can incorporate electric vehicles, our electric fleet in the future. And that was one thing that was received really well. So we'll be working a little bit more on that. A few things that came out when we had conversations about the budget, which obviously through the study session, you kind of realize some of our concerns, and a lot of the questions that we've asked as we try to really just take a deep dive and do a lot of the hard question ask. So this is what we came up with in regards to some of the concerns that we still have with the Audit and Finance Subcommittee is understanding the reserve amounts, not necessarily the amount itself, but the history, the trends, how we came to that amount, how we intend to spend it down, and is it relevant right now, knowing that we're in a pandemic, and how can we use it to help address some of the service reductions that otherwise, maybe wouldn't have to be necessary. We also talked a lot about the request for the 5 and the 10%. I think this is something that came up from Mayor Gallego, and the Audit and Finance Subcommittee was very supportive of understanding what a 5 and a 10% budget reduction scenario might look like when you don't have to actually reduce services, and what that might be. So that's one thing that we haven't seen yet. It is scheduled to be seen for us in June, so I know we're looking forward to that. And then one thing that we've learned a little bit about when we talk about the budget is really trying to find where the details are when we ask these questions. And we've asked that the additional details in the budget presentation that mirror the level of detail that we actually get in our quarterly budget updates. So that's kind of one of the things that we're working on, and I would ask or let the board know if there is information that you need. If you go to the budget updates, quarterly budget updates, there's a lot more detailed information in that, and that's kind of one of the things that we were trying to tie together just a little bit more too. And there was a little bit of discussion too, understanding that when we do approve the budget, that we are not committing to any type of permanent funding when it comes to the ARP recovery monies too. So we know that we want those to be separate. And also, I just overall concerns with the RPTA is that we have a 4% increase in growth and spending, and we still are doing service reduction. So we just are very curious about that being sustainable and necessary. And with rail, we have a 5% increase. I know it started with a 12% increase, so we certainly do appreciate the thought that we went from 12 to 7 to 5, but also just trying to understand, is that going to be sustainable growth for us and for the region as a whole? And also really trying to make sure that we are incorporating the 5-year forecast in when we talk about our budget, and making sure that we have the right comparisons so we understand where we expect it to be and where we are. That's one of the things that we are looking to, and make sure that gets included also. So I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. And I think Vice Mayor Stitt brought this up, which I think is really, really good. When we talk about our quarterly budget reports, there's usually some red flags, and we want to be a little bit more proactive in addressing those red flags. So we want to make sure that we can have some of those answers, some of those things already discussed, and whatever that justification may be, to be in writing within our packets. I think that would be super helpful too. So there's definitely a lot of things out there that we've been talking about, and I think we talked a little bit about it last week also. And we talked about our quarterly and the RPTA board authority delegation. We had a lot of discussion. We really didn't come to an agreement, but it was really nice of staff to say, hey, you know what, let us take this, let us look at this a little bit more, and they are going to bring it back. So we do expect to see that in the very near future. And so many things going on. So I apologize for the long presentation, Chair. I just wanted to make sure I'm relaying the best that I possibly can a lot of the discussion that we're having in AFS, because we're doing what we hope everybody expects us to do, which is really take the deep dive and ask the hard questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so important to get this information from you directly. I do have a question for you. You have a lot of information here that's been disseminated out. Would it be possible to add that in the notes of the agenda, maybe some of the bullet points of items that you have just discussed going forward, so that if there's ever other members of the board that are not associated with the AFS committee, if they have questions or concerns, maybe they can ask those questions ahead of time prior to the meeting? Because I'm sure, like myself, some of the items that you're talking about right now, they're not news to me, but I'd like to know more about them. And hearing them right now is great, but if I saw them, 3 days ago when the minutes came out, if I had a couple of questions, I could have sent you a question or Scott and said, hey, can you further clarify what this means and how it affects whatever I was asking?
Absolutely. I would be more than happy to do that. I think we can work to put together some bullet points, because we actually do have a background page in the agenda packet. There's just really nothing in it because I do it verbally. So for me, I'm a visual learner anyway, so I don't like people to tell me things. I want to be able to read it. So I certainly could appreciate that. And I know you and I had that conversation, Chair, too, about a better way of relaying some of the information from AFS. And maybe what we could do is incorporate some of our discussions on the actual agenda items as they come up for the whole entire board to see and to really understand, was it something that we agreed with, where there's some concerns, whatever it might have been, we could maybe somehow put it within those agenda items. So things to think about. I don't know if we can solve it today, but I definitely am willing and able to make that connection and communication better.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for the AFS committee?
Mr. Chair, this is Bill. I don't have a question, but more of a statement.
Yeah, Bill.
Is it possible for us just to get the minutes from that meeting sent out with the board agenda? Everyone does a really good job of capturing almost verbatim the conversation. That might be helpful, but I'm not sure if that's possible.
Chair Edwards,
Yes,
Vice Mayor
yes,
Stipp, we can attempt to get those minutes to you. However, right directly following the AFS meeting, the board packet is generally put together and distributed. We can try to get some kind of meeting summary that day, and then some more detailed minutes that could probably be available the following Tuesday. If that is an acceptable schedule, we can always work harder to get the information to you in a timely manner.
I was just thinking, since we moved the AFS to 2 weeks before the board meeting, that maybe that was enough time, but
it should be. I was actually working on the old schedule, so yes, we should be able to have the minutes. At least they will be watermarked draft until the AFS approves them. But yes, we can meet that goal.
I think that will help at least the chair of AFS not to be scrambling, trying to run a meeting, take notes. All the rest of us take notes. If we've got support staff from Valley Metro there, that might be very helpful. And since you guys do such a good job of really capturing a lot of the conversation, that may be very helpful for the board in draft form.
We will get it taken care of for you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions, comments? Okay. Item number 5 is the purchase of software subscriptions and maintenance agreements authorization to continue in 2022. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all know, IT is a constantly evolving issue, and there's rarely a meeting that comes by that comes to us without some sort of IT or software issue or item on it. We've recognized that this piecemeal approach can sometimes be confusing. And so Jim Hilliard, our Chief Administrative Officer, and Phil Oslin, our Chief IT Officer, have come up with a proposal and that they want to talk to you about making it hopefully more straightforward and easier to understand our yearly needs and commitments as in the IT area. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim and Phil to discuss with you items 5 and 6, which, while they're different, are somewhat interconnected. So Jim, Bill.
Thanks, Scott. Yes, so as Scott mentioned, historically, we've brought needs for IT software or services to the board sort of as the need for that authorization came up, sort of onesies, twosies throughout the year. And we were seeing several disadvantages to that approach. As Scott mentioned, first and foremost, it didn't provide the board with a holistic picture of the software or services that we were using. You were seeing each as its own little island out of context of any other software and services. Secondly, it made it really difficult to distinguish between things that were our normal keeping the lights on software and services versus new initiatives, which we think likely bear more discussion. And so what we are proposing in this memo and going forward is that prior to the start to the adoption of the budget, we would come forward with one memo for services, one memo for software that incorporates all of the normal ongoing software and services that we use to sort of keep the phones and servers running in any given year. When a new initiative arrives, we'll continue to bring those to the board individually. So you'll continue to have those as standalone memos to make space for any deeper conversation that's necessary. Lastly, we think this is a better approach in terms of being both more actionable and a better use of the board's time. Not only will it take up, we think, less time during the course of the year, but because we're having this discussion before the FY22 budget is adopted, should you decide that we shouldn't be pursuing any of the software or services that we'll share with you today, we'll take those out of the budget. Whereas by comparison, if a contract is disapproved at some point during the course of the year, the money remains in the budget, doesn't really have a fiscal impact on the department per se. So we hope that this makes for both a more meaningful and more efficient discussion of these items and helps us to focus on changes where we've got sort of meaningful new initiatives going forward. With that brief explanation, let me sort of orient you to the way the memo is laid out to make sure that what we're seeking is clear, and then I'd be happy to take any questions. If you go to the second page of the software request memo, you'll see a rather long table. So this table is set up in two sections. At the top, you'll see a section with a bold header that says FY22 authorization requested. So the numbers that you see in this table, for example, in FY22, the subtotal there is $372,200. That's new authorization that we're seeking for the particular software products that you see listed. Beneath that, there's a section that says FY22 existing authorization. Those are software products that we have previously received authorization from the board for, in many cases for multiple years. We're not seeking that authorization. It already exists. We're simply displaying it here because we want to provide the whole picture with the context for all of the sort of ongoing software that we're using in any given year. So that bottom section of the memo is for information only. It's the top section that's actionable and that we're focused on today. The second thing I'd like to point out about this table is you'll see that in FY23 and 24, you have a whole bunch of TBRs. TBR in this case stands for to be requested. So like a lot of other products that Valley Metro purchases, we virtually never go out and do a standalone RFP for software and services. And that's because every public entity in the state is buying largely the same software and the same services, and therefore we always get our best pricing by leveraging that statewide volume and using cooperative contracts, whether those are through the state of Arizona or through other public cooperative purchasing agreements. Therefore, we have the flexibility to seek authorization in one-year increments in most cases, rather than multi-year awards the way you would do with a typical RFP. And so one of the changes that we will be making with this new approach is moving to these one-year increments so that each year the board gets to review the software and services that are requested and make a decision on those. The one exception in this memo is the GIS software Esri that you see, where there are amounts for 23 and 24. Esri offers a volume discount for doing multi-year purchases. GIS is a super important part of our operations, and so we feel the discount sort of justifies a multi-year request in this case. So with that clarification on how you read the memo, if there are any questions about the particular software packages that we have here, what they do, the need for them, any changes from year to year, I'd certainly be happy to answer those.
Are there any questions out there? No? Okay. So item number 5 is a request. I need a motion and a second to authorize the CEO to continue procuring necessary software subscriptions and maintenance agreements. The period of authorization will cover FY22 through 24, and the amount not to exceed $540,200 plus a 5% contingency of $27,100 for a total not to exceed $576,300. Do I have a motion and a second?
Bridget Peterson, so moved.
Thank you, ma'am.
Second, Robin.
Thank you, Robin. All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Bill.
this is Bill. Can we have a little discussion on that? For
Absolutely.
just a second. I'm trying to digest this because, and I even got a special note from Mr. Hilliard on the side explaining this, which I thought I understood, but I'm fairly confused by the request right now. Are we only authorizing the purchase of these particular softwares, or are we authorizing $500 and some $1,000 for any software that Valley Metro thinks we need?
Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor, thanks for the question. So the budget, which Paul will discuss in a moment, talks about the dollar amount to be included in the budget for use by IT. This memo is specific to these software packages in the amounts listed. So this is giving us the contractual authority to take the money that you will approve in the budget in either today or in future meetings, and to use that to issue contracts to purchase software for these products in these amounts in FY 2022, and then in a GIS exception in 23 and 24. So it's limited simply to these software products in these amounts in 22.
Okay. You talk about these software products and the authorization is for 577,000?
576,300.
567, actually. Yeah, and maybe if I could help, if you, Vice Mayor, if you took the, on that page 2 of the memo, if you add 372,284 and 84, it equals 540,200, which is the amount requested. You add a 5% contingency to that, which gets you the 567,300. It doesn't jump out at you. I mean, I guess we should have included a total there, but you see what's 372,200 I'm pointing to?
I do now.
372,200 plus 84 plus 84 is the 540,200 that is asked for in the recommendation. You add on the 5% contingency to that to get to the 567,300.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just add, the reason we include the contingency there is we'll go out and actually make these contractual purchasing agreements at the start of fiscal 22. That's a couple of months out. In some cases, the underlying contracts will have expired and been reauthored, and sometimes the prices change a little bit. And so that's why we include a small amount of contingency in case between the period in which we got these quotes 6 weeks ago and when we issue the contracts, 8 weeks from now, in case the contracts have changed at all.
All right, thanks.
So does that answer your question, Bill? Vice Mayor Stipp, are you good with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions? So do you want me to reread it since I gave a wrong number? Or are we good? Pat, do I need to reread this, or are we good with the motion and second?
No, Mr. Chair, I think you're okay. Now that we've everyone's understanding that was, you just transposed 2 numbers, so we're fine. 567,300.
567,300. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So
My motion stands, Mr. Chair. Bridget Peterson.
Thank you, Bridget.
Same with my second.
Thank you, ma'am. So all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Thank you much. Item number 5 is the IT professional service purchase authorization to continue in 2022.
And Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to Jim Hilliard, I believe, for this. Jim.
Thanks, Scott. Mr. Chairman, members, if you could once again turn to the table on page 2 of the memo. So this table is laid out in exactly the same manner as the software memo. So you'll see a top section of authorization that's being sought. And so, for example, in FY22, that's $2,571,300. You'll then see a bottom section that is ongoing authorization that we've received in previous board memos that we're simply providing for information here. So it's a holistic picture. The one other potential source of confusion that I want to point out is we have an FY21 column that are our anticipated actuals to provide you a comparison for year to year. And if you look at the second line of this memo, Managed Unified Communication Services, you'll see a 21 anticipated number of just under $50,000. and a number in 22 of 149,000, it looks like that's a massive increase. But you'll notice in the columns for FY23 and 24, we have dashed lines and then to be requested once again in 25. And so what we're trying to communicate there is this is a particular product whose contract requires the purchase of the service in 3-year increments. And so we'll pay for the 3 years in 22. That service then carries on through 23 and 24, and then we'll pay again in 25. So if you take that $150,000, you divide it by 3 years, the actual cost per year hasn't changed. It's simply the structure of that particular cooperative contract that we're buying off of. We actually think that's a good thing for Valley Metro because it locks in that price over the period, so we're insulated from price increases during the additional 2 years of that term. So that's, I think, one thing that might have been a source of confusion there. With that, if there are any questions on the services I can answer, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Yes, Bill.
All right. Jim, can you talk about, you're asking for $2.5 million of new IT services. You're asking for that authorization, but there's been no explanation behind any one of them in particular for the rest of the board. Can you talk very briefly about what some of these things, how they're new for us this year? For example, the service desk, is that something that we have been doing historically and now we're getting ready to move forward? And the information security support program, how is that different than what we talked about last month or the month before when we had that very long conversation? Just some very high level, since we have no slides, we have no information, how does the rest of the board know that this is a good item to move forward?
You bet, happy to. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'll touch on each of them very briefly in terms of what they are, kind of really just supplementing the information that's in the body of the memo. And then let me key on where there's a difference between what we are currently doing in 21 and what's anticipated in 22. So starting at the top, Service Desk, Network Operations Center, and Data Center co-location. We have a single contract where we purchase our service desk, where when an employee is having a problem with a device, they can call, open a ticket, get immediate help with that issue, etc. So service desk is a service that most small to mid-sized organizations outsource because it has a lot of economies of scale. The same group of folks that serve 500 people can serve 2,000 people. And so contracting with a company that serves a larger user base is virtually always cheaper than doing that yourself. So that's why we contract for this. We've been contracting for this service for probably the last 6 years. Oz could give me an exact number on that, but this is an ongoing service that's authorized, that's regularly authorized. I think we've typically come to you seeking a 5-year authorization, and now we're moving to year by year to make it more responsive. But it's an ongoing service. You do see an increase in the amount projected in the 21 actual to FY22. And I'll just point out, you notice it's kind of a one-time bump. So you have a jump between 21 and 22, and then essentially a drop back down into 23. And that bump really has 2 sources. The first is in FY22, we'll be implementing our new enterprise resource management system, essentially our new accounting and procurement system, a new HR system, and a new enterprise asset management system. So 3 giant software packages that will touch every member of our organization. In addition, we'll be bringing, all of the staff who've been working from home back to the office. Some of them for the first time ever because they were hired, during our pandemic precautions. And so because of those changes, the need to provide extra support to users as they begin using these new software packages for the first time, and the need to provide extra support to users as they come back to the office for the first time in a year, we think we're going to need about an 8% increase in the number of user support hours over a normal year. There's just a lot more disruption happening this year than in a normal year. And so you see that one-time bump in 22 to deal with those major changes. And then you see that coming back out in 23 as we go back to a more baseline operation. The one other thing that's a change between 21 and 22 to the tune of about $11,000. Is there was a time when Valley Metro had servers in administrative offices all around the region. That's not a best practice. They're not as physically secure as they need to be. They're also not as safe from power outages and internet outages as they need to be. And so for that very reason, we have data center space. So one of the things that we've been doing over the last several years is moving those servers into the data center. When that happens, you have to pay the data center for hosting them, but it's money well spent because they're very physically secure. They have redundant power, redundant internet, et cetera. So in FY 2021, we moved a set of servers out of closets in administrative offices and into the data center. We did it in the middle of the year. So now as we get into 2022, we have to annualize that cost, and it's about an $11,000 bump. And so you see that as part of that change that continues between 22 and 23. So all of what you're seeing, to summarize, for Service Desk Data Center and NOC is simply ongoing effort. We simply think we're going to need about 9% more of it in 22 because of all these software changes and because of everybody coming back to the office. Moving to unified communications. It doesn't make cost sense for us to manage our own phone system. That's a specialty expertise. And once again, a few highly skilled phone techs can manage a whole lot more phones than Valley Metro has, so we contract that out. And as I just pointed out a minute ago, that contract has been in place for a number of years. We're simply continuing it for the next 3 years here, and we're continuing it at exactly the same cost as it has been in previous years. With respect to the information security program, so last board cycle, we were able to present to you an update on that program, and the center of that discussion was an analysis that we had done by some IT security architects, comparing us against the federal standards for IT security. They found that we were essentially at, I would say, sort of a C+ level. We believe we don't need to be an A+, but we do need to be an A. And so we've put together a plan to incrementally move us to that over the next 2 years. And so the cost that you see in FY 2021 was the conduct of that assessment over a 6-month period. What you see in FY 22 are really 3 different things. It'll be at the end of the year refreshing the assessment, but currently it's that same consultant working with us to identify mitigations to potential IT risks so that we are proactively protecting ourselves against precisely the kinds of things that we saw happen to Kingman and others. And then finally, to conduct penetration testing. So this company will bring in white hat hackers, and they will try to hack us both technically and through phishing and other ways to identify weaknesses in our system so we can proactively plug those. And so that is the amount that you see for 2022. We anticipate in 2023 the amounts to change and continue to decline. So while this is a year-over-year increase, if you were to annualize the 21 amounts, the 22 is actually somewhat less than that, because each time you perform that assessment, you have a baseline to work from, and you're not having to redo a bunch of foundational assessment and analysis. The next line.
Hey, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to cut you off. I was looking for something much briefer, and you hit the 2 that I was most concerned about. I think the other ones are self-explanatory. So unless you've got some new info, I think you probably gave us more than I was shooting for, and I apologize to the board for the delay, and to you for having to reread the memos, but I appreciate it.
Sorry about that.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve this item.
Second it.
Let me read it first. So the request is, I need a motion and a second for the CEO to continue procuring the IT services for the period of authorization to cover 2022 through 2026 in the amount not to exceed $6,619,100 plus a 5% contingency of $331,000, for a total not to exceed authorization amount of $6,950,100. So need a motion and a second.
I'll move that.
Thank you, sir. So we have a motion.
Second.
Thanks, sir. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? All right, thank you all much. Item number 7 is the status of Valley Metro's COVID-19 response plan phase 2. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I think as everyone can understand, even with the events of the last week or so, COVID recovery is a moving target, and it is we can see with the rapid changes in both CDC pronouncements and personal behavior and how it impacts us. We are working as best we can to put forth our best efforts, largely within our current budget allocations, to be proactive, to respond to whatever the pandemic challenge presents today, to continue to build comfort among our ridership. We did a brief rider survey a little while ago. We are looking to update that since the world has changed quite a bit, if not in reality, certainly in perception among our riders. And so with that as the introduction, I'd like to introduce Susan Tierney and Mariah Bedient, our communications manager and our marketing manager, who will go over a brief summary of what we call our phase 2 response plan is to dealing with service and how we interact with our customers with COVID-19 pandemic. So Mariah, I believe you're first.
I am. Thank you, Scott.
Okay.
And
Go
good
ahead.
afternoon now, chairs and members of the board. As mentioned, my name is Mariah Bedient, Marketing Manager, and I'm co-presenting today with Susan Tierney, Communications Manager. We're very happy to be here today to share with you the status of the COVID-19 Phase 2 response plan, which employees and contractors across the agency have initiated and executed over the past year. As a reminder, we did provide status in October where we shared Phase 2 plans. Today, I'll walk through a refresher of the objective, share results from Phase 2, then Susan will join to continue sharing results, and we'll end with strategy beyond Phase 2. So next slide. The objective prior to the rider survey was to be reactive and proactive wherever possible to the pandemic, to protect our riders and employees, keep service to the highest possible levels, amplify communication with our riders, and show that public transit and its frontline employees are essential. So the Phase 2 update, next slide. Phase 2 was really developed leading back to July 2020 and really geared up around the October and November timeframe. After conducting the rider survey in June of last year, we pivoted from reactive to proactive, and we used that data to develop strategies that address rider concerns in an expedited timeframe. So through those insights gathered from that rider survey and with guidance from a cross-divisional task force, there were 7 key areas determined that we would focus on, which geared toward the rider, communication, service, cleaning, our employees, and utilizing and measuring data. So first up, we're going to go into storytelling. From December and extending into extending into April, we ran 2 static and 1 video paid social media ads to promote "We're here when you're ready" message. As you can see, the creative was simple, heartfelt, and eye-catching. The ads were served to 3.8 million adults in the region with a 0.86% click-through rate. So to give context on that click-through rate, Valley Metro's historical click-through rate on all past campaigns averaged a 0.53%. So a significant increase of individuals clicking on that call to action, which in this case was to learn more at valleymetro.org/COVID-19. In addition to the paid media ads, we also posted recovery-related messages on all of our social channels. And some of those organic posts, and organic meaning not paid, that content ranged from the TSA mask mandate, additional cleaning measures, reminding to social distance, and recognizing our frontline staff, just to name a few. That resulted in a great number of eyes on our post, close to 6,000 engagements. Engagements include comments, likes, and shares, and also leading to click-throughs to our Valley Metro COVID-19 webpage. So on to public outreach. Since receiving the cloth mask last summer in June, between City of Phoenix and Valley Metro, outreach teams distributed more than 40,000 masks. We'd like to recognize that most of them were handed out by the customer experience coordinators, the CECs. So a big thank you to that team. And to note, the 40,000 also includes Phoenix's distribution at transit centers and libraries. And now I'll hand it over to Susan Tierney to continue to share Phase 2 updates. Susan? We're not hearing you, Susan.
So sorry about that. Thank you, Mariah. Chairs and members of the board, it's very nice to be with you today. To maintain social distancing on our bus routes, trips were added to express buses and early morning weekday and weekend hours were reinstated. To support front door boarding, the installation of health barrier doors began last December and will be completed by August 1st. Traditionally, our riders would not see how buses and trains are cleaned because it all occurs at our operations facilities. So by adding 5 cleaners at our layover points and transit centers, it makes our daily sanitizing and cleaning more viable and visible. For rail, while we do have cleaners roaming the platforms, we added 8 more cleaners at rail ends of line and along the alignment, just to be more visible to our riders. Also, paratransit vehicles are being cleaned between trips and at the beginning of a service day. So we conducted a frontline worker survey as well, and that was in December and January to better understand how they and riders could feel more safe on transit. So 88% of our frontline workers said they feel safe in regards to staying healthy as a frontline worker at Valley Metro. They feel safe because of the added cleaning on our fleet, having PPE and cleaning supplies that they need, and they believe riders feel safer with more cleaning around them on the fleet and at the stations. Wearing a mask and seeing others wear masks and maintaining social distancing is very important to them. They also believe that to attract riders, we could offer free days, passes, enforcing the mask mandate, and continuing to distance on board. And once again, this did happen last December and earlier this year in January. So let's take a quick look at what we're doing beyond phase 2. In phase 2B, we will continue to use additional cleaners that are on site at the busier transit locations through June of this year, and the fogging and disinfecting will continue indefinitely. So what riders told us back in June of last year is that they wanted increased communication from us, and they want more service information from us. As a result, in July, we will launch the new Valley Metro app that has a real-time service location. This is the new VIX app, and the real-time feature has been accelerated on the app. At the same time, we anticipate the return to front door boarding upon installation of all 900 operator health and safety barrier doors. Our goal is to welcome our riders back to the system, remind them of our health and safety measures that are in place, while also encouraging rider empowerment on their part. Masks and face coverings continue to be federally mandated on public transit. So the campaign will also include a message that fare is also required when they come back to front door boarding. So follow-up survey is currently happening. It's a follow-up from last June. We're just finishing it up now. We have about 2,000 surveys from our riders. It will focus on the change that riders have experienced since we've taken extra health and safety precautions. And then that information will help direct us to our next steps with the response and recovery process. I think Mariah and I both welcome any questions that you might have.
Set an all-time high. Many steel pricing.
Somebody needs to mute their phone. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? This item's for presentation or information only. Are there any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for the presentations. Really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item number 8 is the quarterly report. This is for information only. Are there any questions? All right. Item number 9 is the travel and expenditures and solicitation. This is for presentation only. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none. Okay, item number 10 is the future agenda items request. Are there any members of the committee that would like to place an item for future agenda? Okay. Item number 11 is the next meeting. The next meeting of the joint board is scheduled for Thursday, June 17th. The start time for this meeting is being adjusted to start at 10 o'clock to accommodate the executive session for performance evaluations. And with that, we are adjourned, and we're going to go ahead and move over to the RPTA meeting. Right, so item number 1 is the public comment. For today's meeting, public comments are being taken in a written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2 is the minutes. The minutes for the April 22nd, 2021 meeting are presented for approval. I need a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Bud Hurtke.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, thank you all much. Item number 3 is the Valley Metro RPTA fiscal 2022 proposed operating and capital budget and 5-year operating forecast and capital program 2022 through 2026. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you who participated, and thank you, Chair, for bringing everyone together for a workshop last week. I will now turn it over to Paul Hodgins, our CFO, and to Tyler Olson, our budget director, who will update you on the budget and answer any questions you might have. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Chair, members of the board, our FY22 operating and capital budget has been developed over the last 8 months with a lot of assistance from your staff and in particular the Audit and Finance Subcommittee. And I'd certainly like to thank all of them, the subcommittee and your staff, for their efforts to bring this budget to the board. I'd also like to thank all of the board members for their participation and their input in the 2 budget study sessions that we've held this year. Your input's been valuable in helping us to shape the budget. Lastly, I'd like to thank Tyler Olson and his team for all their hard work in the development of the budget and in putting together the budget books that are online and available. I think they're excellent documents. This budget has been prepared with, I believe, conservative revenue assumptions, and we believe those to be reasonable and achievable for next year. The operating budget that we are presenting is focused on passenger service, with approximately 88% of our operating budget focused on fixed route bus, paratransit, ride choice, and van pool services. Additionally, about 8% of the budget is for what we call regional services, which provides all of the support to the passengers, our call center, our mobility center, regional marketing that provides signage, wayfindings, the website, and things of that nature. Our capital budget is developed to meet our regional fleet needs primarily and to support all of the capital projects in Prop 400. If I could, before I get into the details a little bit, I know we have some new board members. I just wanted to explain a little bit about Prop 400 and our transit life cycle program and how this budget fits into the TLCP. So back in 2004, when Prop 400 passed, transit was one of the 3 modes, and one of the requirements for all of those modes was to create a budget system that ensured that over the life of the tax, the 20-year tax, that revenues and expenditures were balanced. Those are known as the life cycle program. So ours would be the transit life cycle program, or TLCP. If you're at MAG, you'll also hear about the arterial life cycle program and the freeway life cycle program. As it stands right now, we're just over 15 years into the Prop 400 tax, so 15 years behind us, and we have about 5 years left. Part of that budgeting exercise, the financial model that we developed to ensure, as I said, is to ensure that our operating costs, the services that we're funding, are sustainable so that we don't operate in a deficit in any of the years between now and the end of Prop 400. It also ensures that programming of our capital needs, whether it's fleet replacement or expansion or any facility construction, can be funded through the life of the tax. So as part of that, we do have ebbs and flows in our revenues and our fund balance, which typically get programmed out for the remainder of the Prop 400. So just a little bit of context that our budget is largely driven by projects that are in Prop 400 that were approved. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll talk a little bit. As I mentioned, this is a little bit of the schedule that we've been through. We've been working on this really since September, working with your staff, working with the through the financial working group, and working with the Audit and Finance Subcommittee. We've had a couple of budget study sessions with the board, and we are working now looking for the board to adopt the budget for fiscal 22. Just wanted to start to highlight a couple of the changes. We went through the budget in March with the board. So a couple of the changes that we've made since then. We are using ADOT's official forecast for fiscal 22, which is 178.2 million. Just as a side note, we got our April revenues this past, I think last week. We are on track to actually receive at least 180 million in fiscal 21. So our revenue forecast of 178 million using the ADOT forecast, we believe is fairly conservative. It will likely be a little bit higher based on the experience we've seen this year. A couple of other changes from the version we saw in March, changes to the operating budget. We had some updated estimates from the City of Phoenix for fixed route service we purchased from them. The cost increased by about 1.1 million. On the flip side, it's not noted on the slide, but they did include approximately, I think it's 4.5 million in CRISA funds, some of the federal COVID relief that more than offsets that increase. So it really represents a decrease in the Prop 400 funds needed to support those services. Likewise with the paratransit service, the ADA services that we reimbursed the City of Phoenix, they included the CRISA funds. So that decreased the cost by about 4 million. On the capital side, the fare collection system, we moved from what we call member agency disbursements. This is a category where we reimburse cities who are implementing Prop 400 projects. We moved that into other regional projects just to give it a little more regional visibility in our budget because it is an important project for the region. And the other item was that we reduced the capital needs for Prop 400 funds that we passed to Valley Metro Rail just due to some of the timing of our capital construction on the Valley Metro Rail side. So just a quick high-level look at the changes in the use of funds on the operating budget. You can see those couple of changes. Overall, it's about a $2.8 million decrease from what you saw in March. And then same on the next slide, the same for the capital, a couple of minor adjustments to the numbers. Overall, it's a very slight decrease from what, a slight increase from what you saw in March, but 132.6. I would like to pause on the slide for just a second. I think the pass-throughs to Valley Metro Rail here kind of highlight some of the questions about fund balance and how that gets programmed. So just to use rail construction as an example, as I mentioned, there are Prop 400 projects include some light rail construction. RPTA receives those funds and we distribute them, or disperse them to Valley Metro Rail as the construction progresses. So in this case, what we're looking at for May, for the fiscal 22, what you'll see in the version today is we're actually putting aside about $18 million from the Prop 400 revenues. So we're only passing through about 40 million. So that adds to the fund balance. But as we continue in our construction of South Central, Downtown Hub, and Northwest Phase 2, that fund balance will get drawn down to support the construction. So it's all programmed through the Transit Lifecycle Program to be used and drawn down by 2025, 2026. So now just to provide some comparison between our currently adopted fiscal 21 budget and fiscal 22, a couple of things to highlight. We do not have the American Rescue Plan funds in the budget at this point. We expect MAG Regional Council to approve that allocation next week at their meeting. And you'll see in our June board meeting, there will be some discussion about the Transit Lifecycle Program, a lot more detail than the overview I've given today, and some discussion about the American Rescue Plan funds and how they can be used to support the TLCP. Not having them in the budget right now does not impact the expenditures that we're asking you to approve. It will impact the use of our public transportation funds, which are Prop 400, and also the level of funding from the cities that you see under transit service agreements. So that would just reduce those needs when we do get those American Rescue Plan funds. The other thing I'll highlight is fare revenues. We're anticipating about 4.5 million. Just for a little context, our fare revenues in fiscal 19, which was the last full fiscal year before the pandemic, our fare revenues were just over $10 million. So we're still at less than half, projecting less than half of the fare revenues for next fiscal year as we return to front door boarding. And we've estimated kind of a slow return of ridership over the next 5 years, which we'll talk about in our 5-year plan. So again, a conservative estimate on our fare revenues here. Looking at the uses of funds, as I mentioned, focused mainly on service, those top 3 lines of our $167 million operating budget. $108 million roughly is for our bus service, $38 million for paratransit and ride choice, and then $1 million for van pool. When we look at some of the costs, our internal costs, our planning, our administration and finance, and then the regional services, we've held those fairly flat or even a decrease from the fiscal 21 budget. Looking at what we call our pass-through funds, we get some funds that we manage on behalf of either the cities or Valley Metro Rail. An example would be the lottery funds. We receive about $11.2 million from the Arizona Lottery to support public transportation. And on the uses, you can see they get distributed right out. We send them out to the cities, to the towns, and to the county to support local public transportation uses. The Vmr reimbursements is strictly related to personnel costs that on behalf of Valley Metro Rail that we pay for. They reimburse us 100% of salaries, wages, fringes, and overhead related to that staffing. Looking at the sources of funds for capital, the main sources here are the Prop 400 public transportation funds. As I mentioned, our capital program is all developed as part of Prop 400 and managed in the Transit Lifecycle Program. We also rely heavily on federal funds to support the capital program. And in this case, you see the carry forwards and reserves. We do anticipate using about $6 million of our fund balance to support RPTA's capital program. So overall, just about $74 million. On the uses, primarily regional fleet, $38 million. Aside from debt service, which is about $24 million. As mentioned, some regional facilities, some other regional projects, and the member agency disbursements are primarily projects that the Prop 400 projects that the cities are implementing, which we reimburse those Prop 400 funds. So that is a high-level overview of our fiscal 22 operating and capital budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. If there are no questions, I will move on to our 5-year forecast.
Through the chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Paul, just wanted to confirm that the allocation for the federal ARPA funds will come back to the board after it goes to management committee before we make a final decision.
Mayor, that's correct. We are having those discussions as part of our transit lifecycle program, which will ultimately come to the board for approval.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's it for me.
Any other questions? Okay, Paul, all yours.
No, Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Oh yeah, Bill, sorry.
Couldn't get to my button fast enough, sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's my fault. Hey, Paul, how does the West Valley issue that we talked about at the start of the meeting, how does that influence the budget?
Vice Mayor, those cost changes are not included in the budget. We do have some contingency that it would be available to cover that on the expenditure side. Once we resolve kind of what the issues are and have the meetings with the cities and agree to a path forward, we'll have to look at if the contingency is enough to cover that. If not, then we certainly would look at making other adjustments into the budget to accommodate whatever those changes are.
And where do we see those contingencies in the budget? Are they in the reserves or are they somewhere else?
There is a contingency in, we put it in our administration and finance area, but it's about $500,000. But it's, even though we call it admin and finance, it's a contingency for the full budget. So I think if you were to look at the full budget document, it would be kind of in the administration and finance area.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Paul.
Thank you. So just a quick overview of some of the assumptions on our 5-year operating plan. In association with the Transit Lifecycle Program, we also develop a short-range transit program, which is a 5-year look that looks not only at the Prop 400 projects, but looks at what the cities are doing so that we can develop service changes in a coordinated effort across the region. So the service changes that have been identified in the most recent short-range transit program are included in our 5-year operating forecast. And you'll see that short-range transit program at the June board meeting. For our demand services, paratransit and ride choice, we have forecasted to increase the trips by approximately 3% per year, beginning with fiscal 22 as our base. And as I mentioned with fare revenue, we are looking at a gradual recovery of ridership and fare revenue. We don't expect to get back to our pre-COVID fare and ridership levels until probably fiscal 25, perhaps fiscal 26. So again, more of a conservative approach to those revenues on the 5-year program. Our federal preventive maintenance, this is a program that the federal government has, FTA has, to support some of our operating costs, our maintenance costs in our operating budget. So we have moderate increases based on how MAG has programmed federal PM in the Transportation Improvement Program. Just again, looking at some of the assumptions, this looks at our ridership for the service that we operate, the RPTA fixed route, and then service that Phoenix operates on our behalf that's Prop 400 funded. We have an estimate of, again, a gradual return to ridership. Our pre-COVID numbers were, for RPTA fixed route service, were probably around 11 or 12 million. So again, we don't anticipate getting back until somewhere around 25, 26. And then some average fares down at the bottom. You'll see in fiscal 24, we do anticipate that average fare to jump up as we implement as our new fare collection system is fully implemented and in place with all the additional controls that we'll have over the reduced fare and additional fare payment options for all of our passengers. Just looking at the miles of service, you'll see on the RPTA fixed route, there are some changes that reflects what some of those short-range transit program changes are. And then estimated cost per mile for both the service we operate and the service that we pay Phoenix to operate for us. And then on the paratransit, as I mentioned, generally a 3% growth in our paratransit and ride choice. You will note that the cost per trip for ride choice is significantly lower. That is one program that we have really been encouraging passengers to use. And part of our scope of work for the next generation contract, if you will, for our paratransit and ride choice will include some options to have a joint call center so we can identify which trips are best served by ride choice to try to help bring down some of the costs of the program overall, because that ride choice cost is so much less than our paratransit. So just a quick snapshot, the 5-year total of what we're looking at is about a $1.1 billion program, almost $600 million in fixed route operations and almost $220 million for demand service, about $83 million for our regional services, and then some pass-throughs to Valley Metro Rail. On the capital forecast, again, largely fleet related as part of the TLCP as we manage our regional fleet. About $102 million for our bus fleet over the period. We do have some expansion buses programmed tentatively as part of the short range plan. If we don't expand service, we certainly wouldn't buy them, but it's not a large number there. The Vanpool fleet, we do have a significant number of expansions as we hope that that program gets back to growth mode. Adding the Palo Verde certainly will help there. But again, if we are not expanding at that rate, we certainly wouldn't buy the vehicles. Paratransit fleet, about 8.6 million, largely as we replace our current fleet and replace the current contractor-owned fleet for our paratransit services. And then several facilities and equipment, 13.5 million, supporting a couple of our park and rides, some bus stops, our fare collection system, and our bus facilities. So overall, about a $705 million 5-year capital forecast, largely funded with our Prop 400 and federal funds. With that, Mr. Chair, just a recap of the steps we've taken to get this far. It's been a long process. Again, I want to thank everybody for all of their input. And our last slide is, I believe, a recommendation. We do ask that the board approve our fiscal year 2022 proposed operating and capital budget and accept our 5-year forecast. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate it. Are there any questions or comments? Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Yeah, Bill.
So, Paul, we went back to the overall budget increase is about 4% for RPTA, and that includes some service reductions, and I'm still having trouble finding out how those two things balance out.
Vice Mayor, yeah, there are some service reductions primarily in the city of Tempe, but there are also some cost increases that we didn't anticipate. As I mentioned, our what we purchased from the city of Phoenix was increased about 1.1 million that we hadn't anticipated. We also added about $1.2 million in facility state of good repair for the Tempe facility that will reimburse the city of Tempe for. That was not anticipated. Fortunately, that's just working with Tempe staff. That's a 1 year, that's just a next year deal for the 1.2 million to do some of those state of good repair maintenance items. So we anticipate that in fiscal 23, that facility maintenance number would come back down. So it's just a couple of items that we hadn't anticipated that are driving that growth.
I think based on some of the conversations that we have had at AFS about holding the size of Valley Metro in check for at least this upcoming fiscal year. We're supposed to hear on June 3rd at the next AFS meeting. I guess I want to hear from the other board members. There was a lot of concern last week about sustainability, et cetera, about this. And I don't know if their questions have been answered or not. And I don't know that all of AFS's questions have been answered. So I'm kind of curious to hear from the rest of the board what their thoughts are on this going forward, whether we do this today or we wait until June.
Thank you, Bill. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Chair Edwards, this is Robin.
Yes, Robin.
Yeah, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Bill said just a little bit in regards to AFS and some of the questions that we've asked. And I would say I, as the chair, don't feel like we've had them all completely answered, and would certainly love the opportunity for us to have our June meeting and to clarify some of those things, especially really work through that reserve account and how that works, so we completely understand exactly what that looks like, the history, the trends of the reserve amount, and what that expectation is, and also the incorporation of the previous 5-year forecast. We see the 5-year forecast from here on out, but we really haven't seen the comparison of the previous 5-year forecast, and I think that's super important. And another thing that we had talked about too, and we've actually asked, it's been on our agenda and continually gets pushed back, was the request to see that 5 and 10% budget cut scenarios. And it's finally actually coming back to us in June. So I certainly would love the opportunity to hear a little bit more and incorporate some of our thoughts and processes within our recommendation to the board. But that's my 2 cents. And I would ask AFS if any of the other board members have any thoughts or suggestions moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. So any other comments or concerns?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Lauren. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that was too loud, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am, Lauren.
Okay, I didn't know if I was interrupting somebody. There's a little feedback. I am supportive of, especially because there's 2 people who, are on AFS that have asked some pretty technical questions. And I know it was relatively early on, I think, when the request was made to at least have a look at what the budget would look like with those reductions, but without reducing servers, just so we would have a frame of reference for what would it look like. Not to say that that's where the board's going to go, but we don't have that information yet. So I'd be supportive of, I don't know if Bill was making a motion, but I would be supportive of moving things back until we have all the information, have had an opportunity to review everything. There's no problem, at least maybe now I'm asking a question. Is there a problem with delaying adoption of this budget until the June meeting? That's a question for somebody.
So Scott, is there a problem if we were to delay this to the June meeting of adopting a budget, not today.
Technically, there's not a problem because our budget is effective July 1. I'll ask Paul anything, but I also want to, and while I appreciate and respect the questions that have come up, and they have come up, I also want to make sure our expectations are in line with our reality. As Paul said in the beginning, nearly 90% of our costs are based on the operation of fixed route of service, which is defined by competitively bid and negotiated contracts with our providers. And so, that 5 and 10% has been prepared and has been shared with many of your staff. I know we haven't been able to do that to give a formal presentation to AFS, but it was actually brought up by one member of the AFS, and we have shared that. And just to give you an overview on that, and it'll come through, and I'll give Paul some kudos, is that he actually has reduced the budget from the initial numbers you heard back in October, November. The budget has already been reduced almost 5%. So that really is that's your scenario that you're looking at now is a 5%. Just frankly, a 10% reduction to the budget. I think the second side of that question was, could we reduce the budget by 10% and not impact service? And the straight answer is it becomes a mathematic program in that situation. That is no. The only way to do that is to lay off people, reduce staff. And I want to make sure I remind the board that we, in the receipt of $500 million in federal COVID relief monies that has flowed through to cover transit, that one of the stated requirements by Congress is that money be used and that service not be reduced and layoffs not happen. So we do run up against some realities that we have this money that's there, and to go to a 10% reduction on RPTA is not mathematically feasible without reducing service or laying off people. That just because of the existing fixed contracts and other things that we have. We can go into more detail, and are planning to have obviously more detailed discussions with AFS and any other board member that would like to have those. Technically, to further answer your question, we can approve this in June as long as we approve it before July 1. We're fine. I just want to make sure that some of our expectations are. I don't want to disappoint people with expectations that that large scale changes are possible without looking at the service that we provide. And by the way, that service that we provide is basically a bottom up approach where it's defined by your cities and what service they would like in their communities. It's not a top-down approach; it's a bottom-up through the service planning group. So I know that's a longer answer than you probably were expecting, but I just want to put it in perspective for other board members that aren't involved in AFS, where we do get into some of these questions in a lot of detail. I want to give them an overview of to what kind of the conversations we're having.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. Looked like Adolfo, you had a question or comment? I saw your hand raised.
Hello, this is Ortega.
Yes.
I generally have a comment in the budget, actually a cap, and I'd be concerned that by a specific number or percentage will just hamper whether or not we're able to operate. That really, so with what I'm saying, that it's just the cap, not necessarily what our actuals may. I say that because in some areas that there will be a market restrictions in use. Now we can't predict that, but I believe that it's imperative that we not protect the downside far and then be future. So we would continue to do mid-year, or I guess what reports on your financial actuals. That would be action if we needed to meet the demands. So I tend not to look at a slash with would just consider it more as a cap that we would have, whether it's an acceptance of funds that might be, exceptions. I'm not sure how the body handles additional special necessarily. I would not be in favor of just cutting it for the sake of we had a budget cut when the budget cap is really what we're talking about. Am I correct? Is general thinking?
Mayor, Mr. Chair, Mayor, in a sense, yes, you are. What we do is the budget you receive for service are based on the current service plan, and we only pay for actual miles of service that we provide. So if we provide fewer miles than are in the plan right now, then we pay less. So in that sense, yes, it is a cap. It's sort of a do not exceed. And if we adjust service during the year, then we pay less. On the other hand, we do, to answer your second question, we do actually go through a formal mid-year review and mid-year adjustment. We look at the budget every quarter, but we actually go through a formal mid-year adjustment where we look at service levels and we look at any changes that have happened, either upward or downward, based on the city demands or requests for service, upward or downward, and then we will adjust the amount at that time. So in a sense, it does operate as a do not exceed or a cap, however you'd want to say, at least on the service level standpoint.
Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Yes, Bill.
Scott, with this theoretical cap, though, is there not some, and I'm struggling to find the exact word, but once we authorize that, you pretty much have very broad power to move that money around, do you not? Much different than perhaps the mayor is thinking about in his city, as opposed to the city manager and council. Your powers as the CEO of this organization are much different than those of a city manager, correct?
Well, they are to a degree, yes. We do not have a line item limit on money. However, the ability to do that is greatly limited by the fact that, as we mentioned, 90+% of our budget is tied up in committed service levels. Therefore, we can't and don't move money between the amount we've committed to service. If we're going to run so many bus routes on so much frequency, we have to prepare to do that. And we don't move money around from that, because as those providers provide that service, we have to pay them. To say we move money around, I mean, we can say that we have a certain amount of money in accounting, and we decided we needed to put some more money into cybersecurity. We do have the ability within limits, obviously, because we have contractual limits on my authority and other limits on my authority. But we could, for example, change some allocation between finance and cybersecurity if it were a small amount. Anything as big has got to come back to the boards, because I can't approve a contract, especially here at RPTA. That's where the authorities come in. I can't move money around and sign contracts that exceed the authority. That would have to come back to the board. So while yes, technically you're right, in reality, the ability to move significant monies in between budget items is virtually non-existent.
Well, yeah, and I think that to assist the mayor in his trying to come to grips with how this board operates, I think you've got a little bit more leeway than the average city manager does in moving monies, and I'm not talking about large sums where obviously we're gonna cut bus contracts to increase the office of the CEO, but. Right. But so in an effort to help the mayor kind of understand that, I know I'm more anxious to see and have that discussion at AFS regarding the, really what is the budget scenario and what was the reduction and how did we get there? If it was such a simple process, I would have thought we might have had it by now. So I would be more in favor of waiting until June to have this discussion after AFS is fully committed to the support of this budget going forward. And I don't know if I need to put that in the form of a motion, but, you know, I think that's kind of what I'm waiting for. And I think that's, and I don't want to speak for the rest of AFS, but I think that's what we're waiting for in its totality.
Well, if that's a motion, I would second it. Thank you, Vice Mayor Stipp.
Can I support Adolfo?
That's all right. I'm good. I was gonna, can you hear me? First of all, can you hear me? That's my, yeah. Okay, I was just gonna thank Mr. Smith and his staff for coming out on Tuesday and meeting with the city of Tolleson. And I was also gonna suggest that we postpone this budget approval until June, simply because it gives me time to present to council, and we're gonna meet on Tuesday. But it seems like it's a done deal, and so I agree with the motion. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, I will formalize it in the form of a motion that we table the budget adoption until the meeting in June.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to table the budget until the June meeting. And it sounds like we had a second, is that correct?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, so all those in favor of postponing the budget, the adoption of the budget till the June meeting, motion by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
So we have one nay and it looks like the rest are ayes. So we will be postponing the meeting. So Scott, I would ask that you please work with the members of AFS to get the answers that they are looking for, as well as those members that are not part of AFS that still have questions. Get their answers, or their questions answered as quickly as possible so they can disseminate to their folks what needs to happen so they feel comfortable coming back next month and approving a budget.
Mr. Chair, we will certainly do that. And I would also suggest, I believe Paul sent out some specific information related to 5-year updates that Councilmember Ardonda Savage was asking about. Those have been sent out, and also a review of the fund balance and the reserve. And we'll talk some more about exactly what that is, because this is one of the things, and we'll go over this with AFS, but for the rest of the board, I know it came up during the study session. The definition of our fund balance and reserve, as Paul explained, is very different than what you see in a normal city, where we don't carry over a reserve from year to year as I would say the first line item in a budget. Our fund balance is based on the transit life cycle plan and the amount that is available within that plan, some of which is available next year, some of which has been allocated for 3 or 4 years down the road, but it's more of a longer term plan, which has a snapshot, which is a fund balance. The purpose of the minimum reserve is to make sure that we have enough funds on hand within that fund balance to handle the basic needs of the agency. But we will, and that's the other schedule I think that was sent out by Paul. We will go into those in more detail with AFS, make sure that we have a complete understanding of that. And once again, if there are any other questions, specific questions from any board member, please feel free to call, write me or Paul or Tyler, any of us. Please let us know, because we're here to answer those questions that will make you feel comfortable with this budget.
And I would second that. Yeah, please, everyone, if there's any questions or concerns you have, please reach out to Scott, because he and his staff have put a lot of time and effort in presenting this budget, and we owe it to them to make sure that when we come back next month, you have all your questions answered so that you can comfortably vote on a budget. So again, thank you so much, Scott, and staff for presentation today. Appreciate it.
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is Bill. I got a question for Scott.
Yes, Bill.
On this reserve issue, late yesterday is when Paul sent out the FY18 through FY22 reserve chart. Can we see what the projections look like going forward as well? He talked about the intent is for that to be spent down, but I think we need to see what that looks like and how that comes, because some of that reserve is, I don't want to say contrary, but it's, you know, when there's money left over at the end of the year, the comment that was made is that money goes into reserve. Well, what is, if we're programming reserve, we should see what it looks like. So really to kind of get a good picture of the past and of the future of that, I think will be very helpful for the AFS meeting that we're going to have in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that we can absolutely do that. And that's actually part of the 5-year plan. And that is what the TLCP is. And I think just food for thought as you're looking at it, the term reserve is, we need to be very careful how we use it because it's different than what I even normally think of. Reserve as a fund balance. Really, we deal in a fund balance mode, which is at the end of the, as Paul explained, did a very good job explaining, by the way, Paul, our transit life cycle plan. It started in 2005 and the life cycle plan terminates at the end of Prop 400 at December 31 of 2025. At that point in time, in a perfect world, you would have a fund balance that would be completely allocated and spent and down to zero. Anytime before that, that fund balance exists, but it exists over to indicate what is available right now to take care of the remainder of the period. Right now, we're at 5 years left because we're in 2021. 4 years left in budget after 2022. The reserve amount is actually the minimum fund balance that the board in 2016 decided they wanted to make sure they had in order to make sure that that fund balance didn't get below what were minimum levels to take care of us staying in business. So for us, we use sort of two things, and sometimes those terms are used, I think, inappropriately interchangeably, and they're really not. The fund balance is the snapshot as of July 1 of the entire TLCP program. The reserve then is the minimum amount of that fund balance that the board has said we need to maintain. So that's why when you see, for example, I'm just throwing numbers out here. If the fund balance were $100 million and the reserve were $30 million, that's not a misuse of funds. That's just a statement of how much money we have left. And it's a good thing because what we're saying is that we're plenty covered over what the board in 2016 believed was the minimum that we need. If we only had 31 million in our fund balance and it was 30, yeah, it would worry. If we get to a budget cycle and it says the fund balance projected is only going to be $20 million, then we have a problem because we violated what the board said they needed as their minimum fund balance moving forward. But the difference between this and other is that in the city, for example, and I'm not going to talk for all your cities, but the ones that I've been involved in is that you take your reserve or your fund balance and it rolls over to the next year. And that is sort of what happens here, but our time frame is much longer because we look at more of the life cycle for our fund balances. And because as Paul said, you may have an item now, a capital item that is committed for 2023. It's going to be in our fund balance and we don't want to utilize that but it's not going to be spent for 2 or 3 years. So those are the things just to keep in mind as we go through the details with the AFS and we'll come back to the board and talk to those also. There are some quirks, as I've said, that are a little bit different. And then Mayor Ortega, I believe, brought up some of the differences between how you handle your annual budgets and yes, how we do ours. I do have different capabilities than a city manager, and we do have a different thing, and that's because of the life cycle nature of our finances.
Thank you.
I hope that explained and didn't confuse.
If I could add, Scott, there is a forecast of our fund balance in the 5-year forecast in the budget document. We'd be happy to forward. I could forward that page to you just so you can see what that forecast is.
Paul, I think bringing that together to AFS and we put it in one document that we can send to the entire board instead of saying, go over here and look for it here. It's in this presentation over there. If we formalize it all together, I think the AFS has a pretty good handle on what we're looking for and what we think we've heard from the rest of the board to bring that to the June meeting. So the June presentation, you'll get unanimous support from AFS and this board can confidently vote on the budget. That's what I would envision is happening in the month of June.
Okay. Yep. We can certainly put them together.
Okay. Item number 4 is future agenda items. And so is there any member that would like to place an item on a future meeting? Okay. On a side note, tomorrow you should be receiving an email information regarding board, officer, and subcommittee elections. So please keep an eye out for that if you're interested in serving as one of the subcommittees or chairing this fun meeting. Please fill out the form. Item number 5 would be our next meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 17th. The meeting is going to start at 10 o'clock in the morning to accommodate the executive session for performance evaluations. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. Is that it?
We will stay on for the VMR board meeting.
VMR meeting. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll take
Chair Edwards.
be 30 seconds here.
Yeah, please do.
Can we
Are
add the
we-
minutes to the consent agenda?
Yes, we can do that. Would you like that on a regular basis or just for today?
I think it makes sense to regular basis.
Regular basis. Okay.
All right.
Chair
Should we
Heredia,
start, Pat?
yeah, just a quick question. For the budget item today, would you like Paul to give the VMR budget presentation or just hold off until the June board meeting?
Unless folks have anything, we should hold off. We're holding off the RPTA one. So
Okay, so when we officially start the meeting and we get to that item, if you just want to say it'll be held over until June, I'll note that in the minutes and we'll be good to move forward. So if we're ready, I don't need to take a roll call, so we can begin when you're ready, sir.
perfect. Welcome everybody. Item number 1, public comment for today's public meeting. Public comment is being taken in written format, will be entered in the official minutes of the meeting. And then item 2, we moved it to the consent agenda. Consent agenda, which it now includes the minutes, is presented for action. Anyone have any questions, comments? I request a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda, including the minutes.
Second.
Perfect. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. Motion passes. Item number 4. This is we will be tabling based on the conversation we've had just now in the previous meeting, tabling the budget to the June meeting, correct? Unless anybody has any info, Robin or anybody else.
I have nothing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Perfect. And then item number 5, future agenda items. Anyone have any agenda items or events they want to mention? Hearing none. Next meeting, June 17th, 10 a.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye.
Thank you.